All right, me. It is Christmas Eve, and I read the greatest Christmas story in the world, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. This, I basically read over two sittings. I read maybe the first, I think, 3 chapters yesterday. I read the rest of it today. Very, very fun book. I mentioned before, I'm not a huge fan of horror, and I'm still not, but I think that this book achieves something that I find more interesting about horror, which is like the why are we scared and why do we fear things kind of factor. And right, this and recently Trap, the play, were kind of into that genre of things, which I find much more interesting than regular horror and horror to be scary. And I say that because it is very gothic in the sense that, like, it doesn't attempt to describe things to you in great detail, right? Most of what is occurring in the horror aspects of it and the scariness of it is based around the reader's own perception of what is minimally being described, which is a little more interesting, I think. Shirley Jackson probably most known for this and The Lottery. The Lottery, I think, is the thing that probably most people are familiar with, just because it is one of those short stories that gets taught very, very often, but is also something that I think sticks with people a little bit more. So that's that. But The Haunting of Hill House it's fun, right? I think is the best way to describe it. I never really felt, it's not ooh, spooky, scary chills in my mind, at least. It is very much in a lot of ways it feels silly and it feels goofy, which I think I enjoy a little bit more. One of the things that you're dealing with is, who is Eleanor, who is our main character, and what does she actually want, right? I had to bring this up because there is a point towards the end of the book, kind of like the late middle half or something like that, of where there's a conversation between the 4 people staying in the house that is about, like, what is actually, like, what terrifies people, what scares people the most. And it kind of gets brought up, the idea of, like, knowing oneself and knowing what one wants is the scariest thing in the world. And then Eleanor basically replies that, like, her greatest fear is that she is going to be alone, which is contradictory to all of these other things that she has kind of fantasized throughout all of this. In our getting to know Eleanor phases of chapter 1 and a lot of chapter 2, a lot of her fantasies that she has involve her being alone and being by herself, which is the kind of this fascinating little thing of, okay, so how do we get both that it is her greatest fantasy that exists, but also her greatest fear at the same time? And I think a lot of it has to do with the admittance or the desire to choose to be by oneself rather than be forced to be by oneself, right? One of the things that we learn also about Eleanor is that she is awkward and is not used to people and is not the most comfortable person in the world socially, not because she doesn't try or because of care or anything like that, but it's because she spent almost all of her life having to take care of her mother. And it is this kind of this feeling of being forced into something because of situation, and then not being given a choice out of it, right? And so it's like her greatest desire is to be alone because she chooses to be alone, but her greatest fear is to be alone because no one wants her around and no one chooses her, which then really comes into play later with this whole interaction between Eleanor, Luke, and Theodora and Theo, in which, you know, you can certainly read a great deal into queerness and lesbianism with the interactions between Theo and Eleanor. And really what I think comes down to is it is a love triangle, but not a love triangle for Luke, who is the man of appropriate age, but really it is a love triangle over Theo and Eleanor, thinking that she is fighting for Theo's affection against Luke. And it kind of becomes this thing of fear and jealousy and paranoia of what is there for Eleanor and Theo and what is there for Luke and Theo. And Eleanor gets not chosen, right? And so you have this character that is starting to realize her worst fear, and so now the only option that is left is to take control of it in some way. And so what better way to take control of it than to give yourself over completely to the feelings and the paranoia that exists within this house, and give yourself over completely to it, right? And to let your spirit wander there forever. And that's what Eleanor ends up choosing to do, right? Yeah. I think it's very interesting that there's no definitiveness to most things, right? It is, you have these issues in which you have these haunts that are occurring and these spooky, scary things that are occurring, but they are only occurring to a few people at a time and not to everyone. And they are only occurring with Eleanor around. And so, it becomes the belief that it is Eleanor that is causing all of these haunts in reality, that there's some sort of spirit attached to her. But then also, you get this thing towards, I think it's the middle of chapter 8 or chapter 7 or something like that, of Eleanor being so terribly frightened because she doesn't understand why everyone else is frightened, because the noises are coming from inside her head, and she doesn't understand how everyone else can hear her and he can hear these things. And it's really starting to the point of where it is very clear that she is becoming one with the house in some way, right? She's giving herself into the house as in some way, whether that is because of true ghostly and spirits and spectral phenomena, or is it because she's just allowing herself to fall into the paranoia that exists because of the way this house feels. other things to note, right? I don't know if I actually said it at the point, but the Luke says it at the very beginning, not at the very beginning. He says it towards the middle, I think like chapter 6 or so, that like there is this motherness that occurs with the house, that it is welcoming and comforting, and it is velvety and comfortable and looks so inviting. And then once you are actually in it and you try to use any of the furniture, it is hard and uncomfortable and unnerving, right? And Luke compares that very much to this kind of motherly feeling that exists, which then of course then later also plays into Eleanor's feelings about the house. You get this really kind of wonderful thing that occurs with Shirley Jackson, and I think she does it in Lottery, and I'm pretty sure she does it in a couple different other works. But it is this feeling of like juxtaposition between American idealism and like the reality that people find themselves in, right? And in this case, it is the house itself. The house itself is, right, there's this beauty and grandiose that Eleanor feels when driving to the house and getting to the house for the first time of, you know, she is free, she feels comfortable, she gets to stop whenever she wants, she gets to do whatever she wants, she gets to make her own decisions. And then she gets to the house and it is claustrophobic. It is enveloping in the most uncomfortable ways, right? You have rooms within rooms, as is described, which does not feel natural to people, right? It is very suspected within buildings and with houses specifically, that like all rooms have access to outdoor light, or if they do not, it is very clear what their function is. And this is not the case here, right? It is uncomfortable and claustrophobic. You know, all of the beds and everything is this enveloping comfort that is also very sterile in a way. You have the entire house being built in a way that is intentionally confusing, that things are not proportioned where they should be, things don't quite make sense as to where they should be, things are built slightly too tall or slightly too wide for a person to feel comfortable, right? It's the fear of standing out in the middle of an open field, right? In slightly tall grass, of where you think that you will have a full understanding of what is happening, but there's also this primitive fear of not being able to predict where things are, right? And I think that comes mostly to play within the kitchen when it comes up, of where somehow there's a way outside on all four sides, or all three of the sides of the kitchen, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's also this like, oh, I can run out of any of these doors at any point, but at the same time, it also allows anything to come in at me. And so yeah. I think that's it. That's it for Haunting of Hill House. Very fun, quick, simple. Yeah.